Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of Art of the Beholder, a show dedicated to all things eclectic in the world of art. I'm your host, Novo Day, and today we're going to be talking about art in animation and film by discussing the legacy and works of one studio, Ghibli, in part by focusing on their lead creator, Hayao Miyazaki. To hash things out, we're once again joined by my favorite forest spirit, and that is Mr. Philip Church of philipchurch.com. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for not using my secret forest name.
That would create some sort of you would change it to a different creature or something, right? Like something would happen dramatically.
Yeah.
Like the story would go off the rails like a fucking Miyazaki kind of story, right?
Yeah, it would go very Eastern Eldritch, if you will.
Oh man. So shit's getting really scary. Are you excited today? We're back. Season 3. Opener. We're getting the rust off because I forgot, I think I want to say summer when I was pitching a Studio Ghibli show to you, or was it before that?
I would say summer sounds fair because that already feels like the full 3 years ago. It's been
you had the longest year ever last year,
That's
right?
the longest year of my life, and
and the shortest year of my life.
I'm surprised that January is only halfway over, but at the same time, it's been at a good clip.
Has it been a long January?
Not necessarily. I feel like it's been a pretty fair 2024 so far. You know,
Okay,
I'm still neutral towards the year. It hasn't done anything for me, but it's done not anything against me necessarily. So I'm keeping an open mind.
Let's stay positive,
I'm just
baby.
gonna roll with it. Yeah,
things are gonna be great. Yeah. So let's tell the good people why. Why are we talking about Studio Ghibli today of all days? Well, guys, you may have heard of a movie called The Boy and the Heron. It just came out not too long ago, still at the end of 2023. A lot of us are now just catching it in 2024. But of course, with award season, we are seeing accolades and critical acclaim and it killing it at the box office. And this marks, why that is also important is because it marks a very special time for its, though I built him as the lead creator, Miyazaki has become kind of the de facto leader of Studio Ghibli, much like the Beat Generation. I don't think he tried to be
synonymous.
I don't think he tried to be the leader, though. It just kind of happened.
He's like the front man of a band, where he kind of gets not saying he doesn't deserve a ton of credit. He's
back on his reunion tour.
But, just that when you say Ghibli, most people tend to just immediately think of or kind of assume, oh, it's Miyazaki. It's nah, he's not, they're not one and the same entity. There's an entire team. There's so much that goes into making the Ghibli movies, but somehow Miyazaki is the one whose name is basically the most synonymous and well-known.
And it's important because he came out of retirement to make this film. It's been 10 years since he made a movie, and a lot of people were thinking, oh, he's never going to come out of retirement again. But anybody that knows Miyazaki like we do know that he's been saying that through a lot of his career near the end. And this is the second or third time he's come out of retirement, or at least talked about it. And so it's no surprise that he didn't stay true to his word. He came out of retirement, made another feature, The Boy and the Heron. Now, this time, I want to talk about it now because it could be, he is 82, Philip? This could be his actual last film. And this could be the end of an era. But before we go into the background, I think you make a good point in that though Miyazaki was, kind of the de facto leader, the filmography that is Studio Ghibli is more than Miyazaki. Remember, this is a huge team of animators and skilled writers and directors. And there was a number of Studio Ghibli films that were not made at all by Miyazaki. Or sometimes he would just write it, but someone else would take the helm to direct it or produce it or what have you. So in it of itself, collectively, these films are so very important, and they are more than Miyazaki because a number of them have been just not only groundbreaking in their own right, and definitely not only for animation, but for cinema itself. It's a part of cinema history. When I went through these films again, collectively and ultimately, it reminded me there is no limit to your imagination. Now, before we can discuss, of course, we all need a little background. Founded on June 15th, 1985 by Miyazaki, Isao Takahata, and Toshio Suzuki, the studio has gone on to be just a juggernaut of artistic integrity in the animation industry. What you have to know before we dive into their filmography is probably its most well-known fun fact that Ghibli is not not Japanese at all. It's actually Italian. It's an Italian noun meaning hot desert wind, as well as the nickname of an Italian aircraft, the latter of which, aviation, is a passion of Miyazaki's. Now, they named it that because they wanted to stand apart, be different, and make it known in the industry that they are going to go by the beat of their own drum. And they very much have through their long, long history and now legacy. And the rest, as they say, is history. They've gone on to be nominated and win a number of awards. Accolades include 5 Academy Award nominations, 4 Japan Academy Prize for Animation of the Year awards, 3 Animage Grand Prix awards, and a Golden Bear, and indeed an Academy Award win for Best Animated Feature, both for Spirited Away. So a lot to discuss, guys. Before we do, we're going to take a little break. We'll be right back. This episode is brought to you by short story Post Meridium. Follow Entropy Sessions character Lydia, one of the lead madams of an anonymous house, as she manages the ups and downs of a very unique hospitality market, one that specializes in the most sinful of pleasures only the underbelly of society can really offer. You can find Post Meridium on Amazon and all major ebook formats. Available now. Now back to the show. Mr. Church, it is time to do the damn thing. Before we do what we do on our shows like this, we're going to go through the entire filmography of Studio Ghibli. We're going to take a little break to talk about the Miyazaki films, the ones that are often standouts, the breakout stars, the breakthrough art house pieces. Before we do that, I want to talk about, let's give people a primer. How do these pieces look? How do they feel? What makes Studios Ghibli stand apart from all the rest?
There is a unique look, first and foremost, to just the characters. Not every single film. Again, there are a couple that stand apart, and I do wonder how much it may have to do with how involved Miyazaki might have been. But I mean, the look, you can almost look at certain like films of these and find the commonalities, and like once you catch on, you're like, this must be a Ghibli film. So just they found a way to
They have a signature style and look,
yeah,
for sure.
They found a claim across like the scores, the look, how insanely fantastical and wild some of the stories are, as well as how personal and heartfelt they can be. They just are a wonderful marriage of most of the things that you would get from fantastic collaborations when you have, again, like the team that Miyazaki had behind him.
Because these all of these guys came from animation legacy roots. They all, like, if you actually read the history of his partners and a lot of the studio team members behind him to make these films, these guys were all masters of this very specific craft. And I think it came together, especially when we had a vision like Miyazaki or Takahata or even Suzuki, and then his son, Miyazaki's son Goro, to make some of these films.
I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know another way to maybe look at it. That's very succinct, because the scale of so many of these movies is just mind-boggling. I legitimately, some of these that I had seen a handful of these anyways, even while preparing for this show. Rewatching them blew me away, and I realized just how little I truly understood and appreciated these when I saw them across my youth.
The first thing that stood out to me, honestly, like rewatching them now versus when I saw them when I was a preteen, a teen, or whatever, in college, what have you, was how, now that we've been studying these kind of things so much with our other shows, was how cinematic they were. That, instead of directing the scenes and the action sequences like maybe Disney would, Miyazaki and his peers and colleagues would direct and block the scenes, storyboard them, and map them out for the actual final product as if they were live action films, like how they would follow Kiki when she was moving on her broom, or fight scenes in the first two films, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind or Castle in the Sky. It was, especially for the action set pieces alone, I think I forgot how much action, how much movement, how cinematic these pieces were. And that's how, going back to your point, man, they're so much, like, I can really appreciate them on a whole new level, because they're so much bigger, grander, and God, like, in my head, when I was thinking back of all these films, like, I remember them being kind of these fairy tale fantasy, but I feel like we need to, at the end, when we get closer to the conclusion, we really need to try our best to find a better genre name for these movies, because it kind of pushes the envelope. It goes beyond fantasy or surrealism or folk tales or fairy tales, and it's kind of its own entity and beast. And with that being said, I think it's time to go ahead and talk about these films. So what we're going to do, guys, just like we said in the opening, the Studio Ghibli is not just Miyazaki. There is a long celebrated filmography here, and we're going to talk about each of these films, but we are going to, since we wanted to shine a little spotlight on Miyazaki, thinking that this could indeed be his last film at the end of an era, we are going to probably stop to talk about his babies, but we are going to give a love to the rest of the Studio Ghibli filmography. With that being said, let's start with 1984. And again, this is like the Akira effect, Philip, where it's like 1984, and this is Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. And in your head, you think, oh, it's going to be kind of this crude animation. And remember, guys, going back to the primer, these are all hand-drawn, old school traditional forms of animation, and they make it look years ahead of its time. There's a lot to discuss, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we saw the signature Miyazaki tropes and signatures right away. Female protagonist or heroine, a emphasis on nature and environmental protection, and of course, envelope pushing fantasy. And that really, I feel like 1986 Castle in the Sky was kind of that same formula 2.0. I felt like it was
It's like fantasy punk in a
fantasy
way.
punk. Ooh, I like that. But I feel like this was a little bit of a valley. There's valley and peaks. All of it's great work, but there are valleys and peaks. Some of it just comes down to taste. I feel like this was a little bit of a valley compared to 1984's Nausicaa, but it was still good, and we saw a little
I thought it was
more
pretty
of
awesome. I did enjoy Castle.
Did you like Castle more than Nausicaa?
I mean, from what I saw of it, I made it all the way through Castle successfully. Again, like I said, I just had to fast forward on Nausicaa being like, okay, again, I have like so many movies to watch. Part of it was that once I got to the like automaton in Castle in the Sky, I was like, sign me the fuck up. I liked that automaton, and then like the city, like when you got to the actual like Castle in the Sky, and it went from being like magic. I don't know, like there was even like the fight scene in the beginning, like where it's all machismo. Just that one was really like just so fucking charming. I don't know how else to say it. I actually was really captivated by Castle in the Sky.
We're doing it again, Philip, like without us even knowing that, where we like the same things, but we tend to be on opposite ends of the spectrum. I was a little more of a Nausicaa guy than a Castle in the Sky guy. I'm curious to hear, it's like albums, like they hit their stride by the third LP, whereas I feel like the breakthrough for Miyazaki's films and probably the team underneath him, like figuring out how to do this well, was 1988's My Neighbor Totoro.
This one was incredibly grounded, actually. This is one of the more controlled ones. It's very heartwarming because I love the realistic depiction of like a family. I like the plot development where you don't know like so much about like the mother's illness at first. I love how just incredibly Japanese it is by being very Shinto with like the reverence for nature, like the spirits that are around, and just the like neutral deference of being like, instead of people being like, oh my God, ghosts, it's not like this weird American sensationalism. It was just like the dad just being like, oh yeah, there's a like a forest king out there. Well, yeah, what about it? He's protecting you. Yeah, you're fine.
It's very understood
everything
Everyone
was just
knows.
like it was so something about it being very grounded. It is weirdly one of the most contained stories, and it is interesting that it could be the most famous because if you say things like Cat Bus or even like Totoro, like if you say some of these things, it very well might be like everyone's first image of being like, "Oh, that weird cat monster standing at a bus stop."
Well, it
That
is their
image
de
is so
facto.
famous.
Yeah, and Totoro is their de facto mascot. It's in all of their
That's true.
title cards
They
now.
basically had to adapt it. Yeah, that
I will
did
say
become
this:
that.
it is. I agree with you on all accounts. It is very grounded. I think sometimes people call it like magical realism or fantastical
Yeah,
realism or something like that.
makes sense.
I loved this film. So this is probably my top 3 or 4. I'll say top 5 just to round it out. Probably my top 5, no particular order, is definitely 1988's My Neighbor Totoro.
I think because it's so relatable. Again, it's legitimately just
And it
about, like,
has a
a
cat
normal
bus.
family and a cat bus. But yeah, I mean, it's again, if it like, you're dealing with illness. Like, I gotta say, I'm like, when I saw it when I was younger, I remember thinking, like, the little girl was annoying, but this time around, I was actually really fucking moved. I was crying for a lot of it, thinking about how, like, how would a six-year-old handle being told that, like, "Hey, I know that mom was supposed to come home from the hospital, but she's not." And I remember being like, "She didn't drop the corn. Like, she's still holding the corn." Like, again, that's more things than ever jumped out at me, and this one legitimately moved me a lot. With it being so grounded and with it, like, so just the relatable aspects of, like, who doesn't deal with illness at some point in their life, whether it's your own or a family member. It's just wonderful, and again, it's fantastical and fun and freeing and whimsical. There's, like, no danger to it. I
Hmm.
do like how, while there's strife and conflict, I like how weirdly nonviolent that the movies try to be, which I'll bring up in other appropriate moments, but I'll leave it at that because otherwise we'll just talk about Totoro for fucking an hour.
We could probably do a whole show on this
Probably
guy.
could.
And before I move on, I do want to say, in the vein of a story being so grounded, I feel like it is very hard for filmmakers to do this, but I feel like they all strive to do this, and that is create fully realized worlds. And this film is, and we see this later in a lot of his films, but it wasn't mastered until this third outing that Miyazaki created this really fully realized world where you feel like it's very lived in, and just like to your point, like where the characters, when they talk about spirits, and it's just like part of their world. It's like, oh yeah, that over there, oh yeah, that's always been there.
Yeah, like how the grandma was just like, "Oh yeah, I remember I could see those when I was a kid."
Like, exactly. And we see more of that as the films go on, these fully realized worlds. But before we get there, let's talk about 1988, Graves of the Fireflies. This is actually one of those films that was not written or directed by Miyazaki. It was helmed by other team members.
This was the first adaptation.
Oh, okay. We
Great.
have fun facts.
I made the notes. Yeah, this
Ooh,
one was
give me the
actually
notes.
adapted. Just that this, like, not all of them were actually original stories from Studio Ghibli themselves. There are a handful of
Oh, there's a lot of
adaptations.
adaptations, actually,
Yeah.
now that you bring it up. Yeah.
Interestingly, like, like we'll get to Porco Rosso. That was a manga that Miyazaki himself had written first. So technically he
I
adapted
didn't
his
know
own
that.
work. But yeah,
Okay.
Graves of the Fireflies was also again, talk about grounded.
Yeah.
Fuck me. I don't barely want to talk about this. It's so fucking depressing.
Well, I didn't want to spend a lot of time on these anyways, so I will move on to 1989's Kiki's Delivery.
Novo,
What?
we need to talk about this.
Kiki's
Did you
Delivery
watch them
Service.
did you watch them in English or Japanese?
I did. I cheated. I watched them in English just
That's not
because.
cheating.
Well, I had to. So I tried to. I will say this for the audience. I tried, since while we were on break, I did try to see every single Miyazaki film that he's ever put out, and on paper that's like. we we watch movies all the time. That'll be easy. It's actually kind of work, guys. I don't think you realize how challenging it is to prepare for
When
some of
you're
these
trying
shows.
to give a shit. It's
Yeah,
not a
when you're like
background thing.
really
When you're like, "I need to
focusing.
discuss these things." Yeah.
I liked how to focus. Yeah.
I'm supposed to have a job. I'm supposed to have a family. Like, what?
So yeah, there was a lot of times that I had to put these fucking things on when I was on the Peloton, or I was, like, I tried to fit it in however I could. And so, long story short, that's why I would choose the English dub.
Fair. No, that's totally cool. I just this may have been revealed in the show previously. I minored in Japanese studies in college.
I
I
think
like
our first show was Akira. That's why I
probably
chose you for that one. Yeah.
that's true. Duh, there you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, no secret. So I loved actually hearing all the Japanese again. It's very like nostalgic for me having lived in Japan for a little while. And I do love all the things like I'm curious now. It's like I almost now want to go back and watch them on fast forward in English to see stuff like do they use the word uncle or like hey mister because they called each other like stuff like oji-san like uncle and that's what
Mm.
you would call like a stranger in like their 40s or 50s for instance like you wouldn't or like you could actually say like hey grandma like it's an insult in America and stuff you'd be like hey grandma part of it might be the tone but like literally you could
I
very
think all
politely
of it is the tone.
part of it could be the tone, but you could legitimately you could legitimately get away with like just saying to like an old clearly like an old gray haired woman. You could just call her like Obachan. That's grandma, and you could say that, and it's not seen as like
Mm,
rude because it's actually like
grandma.
it's almost familial. It's literally like you're like oh hey gam gam. So like when you see like an old woman, you can be like hey grandma, did you see where that like cat ran? Like that's like fits in the third of their movies, right? Like where did that cat go? So like I like knowing that they say stuff like, "Hey uncle, did you see where that magical gem fell?" Or like, "Hey grandma, like where did the cat go?" Just stuff like that. So like again, there's all these references to like aunt and uncle and grandma and grandpa. So I enjoyed that and Kiki specifically the way that she like moves away from like her sort of home family and is like living with these other people.
In another fully realized world, right? She's a full disclosure, Kiki is a witch that rides a broom, a broomstick like witches do. And people
She has
just
a
kind
cat.
of yeah, has a talking cat and people just treat her like I mean I think they're like
Normal.
fascinated. Yeah, they're fascinated and they're like, "Oh, wow, you're a witch." But it's not like, "Oh my
She
god, burn the witch."
I love that she shows up and the cop is like, "Hey," and she's like, "I'm sorry, was I not supposed to fly here?" And he's like, "You can't fly here." Like it just right into it, just being like, it's not weird that you are flying, it's that you weren't supposed to fly there. That approach is so just welcoming and like it's accepted. Boom, the floor is there's the ground, let's walk it.
And it creates this like childlike innocence and sweetness to these films, and that's why they become so familial, just like you were saying. And I really fell in love with this film too. This was actually my first my first viewing of Kiki's Delivery Service for the show, for the preparation for the show, and I really fell in love with the story and Kiki and her journey. A lot of these stories are allegorical, and this is definitely a story of finding yourself, finding your purpose. And she found purpose and, well, not only making friends, moving to a new place, but finding a job, finding literally creating a delivery service because she could get from point A to point B a lot faster being a witch flying on a broomstick in the air. So
This
I
film is
just
also
felt
like
like it
that.
was so sweet. Like there was
It
something that
was.
really touched my heart.
Even the use of sound design, like at the end when everything is like super action heavy and she's trying to save her friend from falling from like the clock tower or whatever, and like it goes quiet. Like it's almost like the way that they use that like adrenaline moment where like you don't actually hear anything because you're so focused on the moment. I love that. Everything was so chaotic and the action had risen. And I feel like it just mimicked the fact that like if you're not holding your breath right now, then you're watching it wrong. But yeah, this was one that I did not pay good attention to when I was younger. And I'm so glad I revisited it because again, it is exactly that. It's very sweet. It's very charming. It's a wonder. It's another like top Ghibli slash Miyazaki film to watch for sure.
That brings us to 1991's Only Yesterday and then 1992's Porco Rosso. And before I give you the floor, I feel like every writer wants to write a character or loves to write a character like Porco. Because Porco to me is like Han Solo, right? He's like the rough, gruff, tough, smuggler, bad boy, but the bad boy with a secret heart of gold.
Yeah,
The
right.
bad
Who
boy with like
could easily win the
the
princess if he
soft
wanted to, but
side.
he's too fucking cool to do it.
He's too cool. Like every writer at one point in their writing career life tries to write a character like Porco. And everyone knows Han Solo, so I feel like that's the easiest metaphor on the planet. If you've never
Especially
seen Porco
with the
Rosso.
aviation aspect.
Yes. Well, and we see aviation again going back to the intro and the background section of this piece. We see aviation through lines,
Some version of flying
yeah,
is
throughout
is a constant.
every single film because Miyazaki was obsessed with aviation. It was his secret passion, in part because his father was in that industry, and he didn't know his father very well, but he was clearly affected by it. And down the road, we even get a biopic, just to give a little foreshadowing to a piece later in our filmography. But Porco Rosso was, I liked it. I didn't love it. It's definitely one I urge everyone to see, but it was kind of an outlier, the fully realized world, the man is an actual pig, Porco, and people just treat him like,
As a
oh,
red Rosso plane.
yeah. And people just treat him like, this like anthropomorphic pig is normal in this
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
They wait until halfway through to be like, "Oh, hey, I'm like," he says, "I hate that picture over there." And then another character says, "It's the only one I have of you from before you were turned into a pig." And that's it. They just mention it in passing,
It's
and
one piece
boom.
of dialogue.
They do go into it later, but it's literally in like the third act. It's like
Right.
you've already accepted the fact that he's a pig. It almost doesn't matter. But yeah, it's also just how like it's all about like sort of bounty hunter type of stuff, like pirates and shit again. Like again, the pirates thing, whether it's sky pirates and aviation and pirates, is such a like
Miyazaki
constant
signature
thing. So
trope.
again, this one
Absolutely.
was fun.
It was fun.
It's not too like epitome or
Yeah, you're not going to learn any lessons from it
yeah,
like some of the
but
other
it was cool. And I was
allegorical
glad I
tales.
finally watched it because I've seen it as a like, "Oh, this is a Ghibli film." I've known about it for a long time, so this is one that was new to me.
Don't get me wrong, guys. Check it out. I just don't think you'll fall in love with it quite like the ones we will hit in just a moment on our list. But before we get there, we got to talk about 1993, 1993's Ocean Waves, the 1994's Pompoko, and the 1995's Whisper of the Heart. Now, this was actually written by Miyazaki, but not directed. So again, guys, some of these films he would take the screenwriting role, but then pass it on to one of his colleagues. But in 1997, we are met with probably one of his magnum opusi, and that is Princess Mononoke in 1997.
I would say after Totoro, this is the second most iconic
Well
and like
known, loved, yeah,
recognizable. The
iconic.
imagery is just boom. You know exactly what it is from any shot from that movie.
What is Princess Mononoke on your personal list? Is it top 5 or is it a little now
Oh,
that
for
you've done
sure.
some deep dives? Okay, it is.
It's again, there are a lot of great films here, but Mononoke is fucking fantastic.
Princess Mononoke, again, another folktale, fairy tale, yeah, surrealism, fantasy, all of the bylines. But I will say this: I'm going to give you a little compliment, Mister Church. I haven't got to say that in a while, so I have to say it at least once in every show we do together, Mister Church. I will say this: what stood out to me, I mean, it was amazing writing, animation, direction, music. But one thing that, and I'm so curious what you're going to think of this. One thing that I thought felt just an eensy weensy bitty bit flat was the voiceover acting, the American one specifically.
Well, there you go. Never heard it.
And right. And I think the reason why, and we saw a dramatic difference between this and his second major feature, because he used in Princess Mononoke, he used, famous actors. It was like Claire Danes and Billy
Yeah.
Bob Thornton and
They
all this
spent
stuff.
their like adaptation budget.
But them using, and this is when I realized I thought of you because I was like, I love me some Claire Danes and Billy Bob, and all the actors in there are great on
Nothing wrong with the
screen.
actors, right? They sound
Yeah,
good,
they're nothing,
but
but I realized that they're so used to acting how they would act on screen versus another actor. They're not using their voice to act for the character in the animation, in the anime. So to me, every time I would hear lines from the actors, it sounded very flat, like, I will bite her head off. It was a lot like that. That was my world class imitation of the spirit wolf that Princess Mononoke rides often. I will bite her head off. But it was, you know what I mean? Like, I was thinking of all, like, this is why you guys are so talented and gifted, and we need you because, yeah, the best actors on the planet, Marlon Brando and De Niro, they're good in that medium. But as soon as they change just for their voice, just the voice acting, I feel like their skill set isn't there. They can't. That's why, like, I was like, man, they sure really handed this to just voiceover actors. That's all they do for a living.
Things like that are part of why I gave up on listening to the localized versions of especially Japanese animation a long time ago. It was created with a
The I
specific
would
vision
bite
in
your head
mind.
off stuff.
Pretty much. I bet you it just doesn't really land. And not to mention that it's, I mean, not that it's that big of a deal because it is animation, but even just like the lip sync and like the fact that the amount of time and syllables it takes to say things in certain, language and the way it translates and getting the same meaning and blah, 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 it really affects it more than you would think. So I really have found that, especially as somebody who loves Japanese stuff, I always watch anime in the original Japanese language. So thank goodness I did not have that experience with this because I thought this movie was fantastic.
Oh, the movie's fantastic. I just felt like that part was just a little valley,
Yeah.
on the
And
roller coaster.
I like the approach bringing up like more naturalized spirits again, that it goes with it's a little more Japanese than some of the other ones. Some of them actually take place in Japan. Again, like My Neighbor Totoro is literally like it takes place in Japan. Some of the later ones are literally like in Japan. This one is not, but I still like the way that they have sort of like a Shinto approach to, again, just like nature has spirits, like there's a balance, there's like a due deference to things, and that like what happens when you don't respect that. So this is an epic film that no single podcast or description would ever sell. So again, anybody listening to this who has not seen it, this is easily top 5 Ghibli, but it's just one of the most famous anime of all time for a reason. Don't think like, oh, that's a cliche, like it can't be that good. It's that fucking good.
But see it, but try it. Do the opposite of what I did. See it in its original
Please do,
Japanese
yeah. Again, just deal with the
language
subtitles.
with
I feel like,
subtitles. Yeah.
yeah, I promise you, it's worth it.
That brings us to 1999's My Neighbors the Yamadas, and then 2001's Spirited Away. I will start with talking about Spirited Away by saying I felt the complete opposite with Spirited Away. I felt like even the English voice actors were spellbinding to me. And full disclosure, this is my number one on my personal list. 10 out of 10, from writing, directing, sheer creativity, creature design, music, the lesson you learn in the story, all the way down again to what I talked about at the top of the discussion, the voiceover acting. I couldn't, when I did take the time to look these up too, much like I did with Princess Mononoke, and they were all voice actor pros. I think except for Sen, they were all pretty much seasoned voiceover actors. They don't do much beyond that, and it shows. It shows. And this is where I feel like if you're not going to get a chance to see all of these guys, start with something like Princess Mononoke or Spirited Away, or even to a lesser extent Howl's Moving Castle. This is like really his trilogy.
Spirited Away is very top.
Yeah, this is Berlin trilogy. The Wall. Fucking this is like his groundbreaking era of filmmaking, and this is another example of like when he pushes the fantasy to another level. I feel like to call it a fairy tale would not do it justice, because especially when we see the characters come into the bathhouse, where you're like, okay, this is getting a little bonkers. We're seeing a few of these spirits and spirit animals, and you think to yourself, okay, this can't get weirder, this can't get stranger, this can't get more fantastical, and it does in the best way possible. And I think doing that like really helped you on this journey of, again, much like some of the other stories, this is about a girl. At the heart of the story is it's about a young girl coming to grips with having to move and starting over, and the fear that comes with that, the fear of the unknown, and I have to make new friends, and I have to go to a new school, and oh my god, it's just like life changing. And he uses fantasy to bring that message home.
This one is just the scope of it is insane. The creativity behind the scope of it is just otherworldly. Which this basically this is probably top 3 with the iconic imagery, where you take Totoro, Mononoke, and then this one. You have some of the
like
most
No-Face.
memorable, exactly, the most memorable things that are like on so many fucking like t-shirts, memes, like people that don't even know that they're like what they're attributing stuff to. This is one of them. This is one of the most like weirdly not exactly underappreciated because it is incredibly famous and successful, but it's even more famous than people even like can sort of grasp until you realize like the scale of how recognized it is. And again, there's just nothing that we could say to do it that much justice. So again, probably top 3. I would say. Obviously, you guys got the Novo stamp of like 10 out of 10.
And we could do, like, this is another example, much like My Neighbor and Princess Mononoke. We could do a whole show on just this. Like, that's
Oh, yeah.
how sprawling it is.
We're struggling to
Yeah,
keep
we
this brief, and
to
we're
like
failing.
make it, make it so brief.
I still have weird notes that I plan on bringing up, and I wonder if it'll make it in the final cut.
Well, we have after hours. If you
That's
forget
true.
something, if you forget something,
I'm not forgetting anything. I'm just
we can
gonna
hang out. We can
at
hang
this
out
point,
at the
I'm gonna
bar,
bundle it in. I'm gonna
past
save it up.
close, and talk shop. And that brings us to 2002's The Cat Returns.
Loved it.
Another non Miyazaki film.
This is incredibly non-Ghibli in general. This is where I'm going to bring up. Her name is Makiko Futaki. She is actually deserves a lot of credit for being a lot of that signature style. And this is actually one of the like non-Ghibli style animations. It's a fun movie. Again, it's still like fantastical realism. It's like all of a sudden there's a whole kingdom of cats out there. It's obviously very real. This girl accidentally saves the prince of the cats, and all of a sudden she's whiskered away, I should say.
Whiskered in
It's
Puss in Boots.
Yeah. But it was
We'll be
it was
here all
pretty-
week. Tip
pretty
your
damn fun.
waitresses.
But yeah, this was not something that Miyazaki directed, and a lot of the key animators were very different for this one. So it looks and feels very non-Ghibli, but I will say, as one that I did decide to watch for this, it was still pretty fun. I enjoyed it. It was pretty funny.
they're all
Again, it was
fun.
nice, very lighthearted. This one's not nearly as like dire and like. Oh, they're all fun, but again, some of them will like kind of crush your soul a little bit.
Princess Mononoke, I feel like, is heavy.
That might be the heaviest.
Mononoke
one.
is the heaviest one.
Grave
Yeah,
of the Fireflies.
I will
Debatable.
agree.
Debatable.
It is the heaviest one. Yeah,
Grave of the Fireflies is pretty fucking heavy. But yeah, Cat Returns is really fun. I just wanted to give this one a little bit of credit because it's weirdly it fits in with how fun and lighthearted and just sweet and fantastical it is. But it's weirdly one of the least Ghibli films.
One of the guys, check it out. One of the least Ghibli films, and that brings us to 2004's Howl's Moving Castle. It's they were using a little bit of CG for once. You know, they usually go the traditional route, doing hand drawn, and when we actually see the moving castle move,
medium finally,
it's you can see that CG flair. And this film was, God, it's definitely has that very signature Miyazaki style of writing and direction, and that fantastical realism. But to me, it was like, I don't know, it was like a soap opera. Like, it was this sweet, like, romantic tale that he doesn't normally explore with a lot of us movies.
This one actually genuinely has like a love story behind it. I like that about I love it when films do not push romance and love, and that even though that is present in this one, it is in no way like a showstopper. It doesn't like cheapen the plot at all, because I like the way that they worked in some of the things about it with like not exactly time travel, but I'm talking about how like she goes and like witnesses his memories, but somehow she's actually seems like present for them or something. Like, it was neat. Again, once again, the scope is beyond like a quick description.
And that's where we get into the surrealism, the dreamlike elements and things like that. And the main protagonist, the male romantic lead, is very dreamy. I get it, guys. So
sometimes he's not so dreamy. Sometimes he's a giant bird monster.
That brings us to 2006's Tales from the Earthsea, and then 2008's Ponyo, which is based on The Little Mermaid. And we are finally here. You said you had a lot you wanted to say about Ponyo.
So,
this one goes off the rails too with fantasy. Like, I remember rewatching this, I was like, what the fuck is happening half the time?
Same. So not only was it hard enough to follow with proper subtitles, but when I saw this, I was actually in Japan. And so this happened to come out when I was in my final semester. And so weirdly enough, all of a sudden, like, one of our like friends was like, hey, we've got the DVD, and we're like, yay, let's watch it. And turns out it was actually a foreign release with the most god-awful, barely correct subtitles.
Oh, God.
The sheer nostalgia of me and my friends just losing our shit at like almost following the plot, but these hilariously incorrect subtitles that were like just really clearly missing the point sometimes. So it's like I couldn't focus enough on rewatching it because I was I couldn't stop myself from going back in time to be like, I remember they said this about like, oh, like I'm the god of the electric guitar. I was like, that is not at all what this character was saying. So I was weirdly distracted by my own memories of just really fucking bad subtitles when I was in Japan and we apparently someone brought us a bootleg DVD in Japan of a
That's
fucking
great.
Ghibli movie. So sorry,
I
that's
love
just
that.
that always made Ponyo extra bonkers for me
You
because
cannot make that up.
it's too fucking weird.
Guys, check it out. And Ponyo's like cute. You know, like they've always
Cutesy as
Studio
hell.
Ghibli has always made these very cute, you know, cuddly looking creatures in their films, or these spirits.
The little
And
guys. That's how
and
you know it's a
Ponyo's
Ghibli.
is
You got little dudes
so
somewhere, little
fucking cute.
spirits.
That brings us to 2010's Arrietty, 2011's From Up on Poppy Hill, and then 2013 is another outlier because Miyazaki made a film before he went into retirement, and that film is called The Wind Rises. Now, The Wind Rises is not a fantasy film. It is an animated biopic, which is very rare in and of itself, and it focuses on an aviator, no surprise. They actually creates aircrafts, and he created a very famous aircraft. And this story kind of chronicles his life, his creation, and the effects of what his creation does and eventually did. And we see, you know, since it is a biopic, it still can be considered fictionalized. They take liberties in the nonfiction because there's a lot of dream sequences, there's a lot of surrealism, and how the main character kind of, you know, tackles his own demons and things like that. But it is a lot of people argue this is this one is his magnum opus. This is his best work. But guys, we'll leave it in your hands to decide. In 2013, so Miyazaki went on retired at this point in his career, his first main big one. So 2013, but Studio Ghibli kept making films, even though like this is where I call him the de facto leader, because there was for a long time they were talking about like shutting down the operation because Miyazaki wasn't around to lead things, but they still pumped out a few films, and that includes 2013's The Tale of the Princess
Kaguya.
2014's
Obviously
When
an
Marnie
adaptation.
Was
That
There.
is actually Japanese, like historical sort of fiction lore stuff.
2014's When Marnie Was There. 2016's The Red Turtle. 2020's another adaptation. I know this one for a fact, Earwig and the Witch. And this is like one of the rare, I think Goro did this one of the rare badly like panned Studio Ghibli films where a lot of people really didn't care for it. And there was rumblings that the legendary Miyazaki was going to return, and indeed he did. And he made 2023's The Boy and the Heron. And since this is almost brand new, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the story or any spoilers. Go check it out. It deserves all the critical acclaim and accolades and commercial success that it's getting. And it has all of the Miyazaki staples. And the only reason I wanted to do this piece now, and I am theorizing that this is indeed the end of an era, that this may really be his last film. And we'll see. I could be wrong. He may make another film in a couple of years. But this is the closest thing we've ever gotten to an autobiography piece, much like Spielberg did with The Fabelmans and Nielsen did with the Entropy Sessions. We have Miyazaki doing The Boy and the Heron. And I urge you to see it, check it out, support this guy. It was excellent, but it also may be the end of an era. We'll see. Now, Studios Ghibli has done a lot of extracurricular. They've done a lot of auxiliary projects in their career as a studio, and they have done work in television with 1987's The Story of Yanagawa's Canals, 2014's Ronja, The Robber's Daughter, and 2022's Zen and Grogu and the Dust Bunnies.
I have another. I'm going to go ahead and bring up one of my notes.
Okay,
so
we gotta know, guys.
much like I brought up Makiko Futaki, who again
Yes.
she's one of the key animators for pretty much all the big ones like Nausicaa, Totoro, Kiki, Porco, Mononoke, like again, she is very instrumental in the graphic, like the illustration, if you will, whatever, like the
The
looks of
look
it.
of the piece? Okay.
However, there is a composer, Joe Hisaishi, which his real name is not actually Joe, but that's just, his famous name.
His stage name?
Yes, but Joe Hisaishi
My
is
real name
the
is not Novo.
composer.
Did you know that?
What the fuck?
Am I blowing your mind? Season 3, spoilers. My real name's not actually Novo.
Joe is about as instrumental in that he did the score for most of the biggies, which again goes to like Nausicaa, Castle in the Sky, Totoro, Kiki, Porco Rosso, Mononoke, Spirited Away, Howl, Ponyo, Wind Rises, and then Boy and the Heron. So
Mm.
basically, he and Miyazaki himself, are crucial to the Ghibli style. And it's interesting so that knowing that I actually already knew about sort of Joe Hisaishi just because I'm a big old nerd. And so I made sure to pay attention to the various scores across these films. And it really is fucking amazing how talented this man is.
Oh my
Because I mean,
god,
he's
yes.
done more than just, like those are his most notable ones. And he's still like has like his own solo career and does other like, scores for I'm thinking like probably video games and tons of probably anime and other stuff, like TV shows, I should say. I remember sometimes it's like, wow, this is interesting, like more of like it's using like MIDI like at the time. And like this one's way more orchestral, like just the way that some of them like are like Porco Rosso has like a weird European vibe to it. It literally like it's again like the name is in Italian. Like when Marnie was there, it's got like another sort of like whitewashed, like vaguely European setting too. Granted, not that he did the score for that, but just Ghibli is again, it's not all in Japan. A lot of it is very Japanese, and some of it was actually in Japan. But regardless, like this man, similar to like, for instance, how we talked about Nobuo Uematsu and the way that he was able to bring so many video game worlds to life, Joe Hisaishi did just none of this could have happened without him.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I'm actually kind of glad you shined a spotlight on him for a little bit and gave him some love. I think that, I mean, I again agree on all accounts, and I think the thing that stuck out to me as the most revolutionary is that he would have full film motifs. Think about some of your favorite films like Star Wars or Harry Potter or even Marvel. You can think of that main you can think of those themes in those films that carry on from film to film, and they give an identity to the film through music. And
Oh
I
yeah,
feel like Joe has done that for Studio Ghibli films,
absolutely.
because in anime, this is really a deep cut. Anime, what people probably don't know musically, when it comes to anime, most composers will write themes for like characters. They don't create the score like an actual live action film score, but Studio Ghibli does. And that brings us kind of round circle to how we pitched them in our thesis statement, that they are, or in the primer to the discussion, is they are much more cinematic than most of their contemporaries, and we see that in the music as well. So other auxiliary miscellaneous projects include, I'm going to fly through these, so bear with me. Contributive works, they have completed 55 since 1991. Short films, they've completed 24 since 1995. Commercials, completed 17. Documentaries or featurettes, 16. Distributive works, 16. Cooperative projects with other studios, 13. Much like Philip said, video game projects, assisted in the completion of 5 games. Stage productions, assisted in the completion of 4 productions. And museum exhibitions, they have done that off and on. There isn't a hard number, but they do have animated productions, and they have animated layout designs in those exhibitions. Before we talk conclusions, I did want to talk a little bit about there are we've already talked about this as we've been discussing it, but just to give a little conclusion on some of the themes that that resurface over and over again, or the social commentary or the project similarities. There are some through lines, and a lot of it is because a lot of them are written and directed by some of the same people over and over again, Miyazaki included. And that is, again, a lot of these films champion female protagonists or full female heroines, not not the drug kind, the fantasy kind, nature and environmental protection, and that the greatest threat I saw time and time again in these films is often the greatest threat to the world is us, mankind. And we see most of these through the storytelling device that is the allegory.
Aspects of like greed kind of stuff like that, just like, again, like I've already mentioned Shinto a couple of times, which I'll go ahead and I've been a bit, I guess, presumptuous. For those who don't know, Shinto is a pretty ancient, you could call it a religion, I guess, of Japan, which most people associate Japan with Buddhism. Buddhism is still very, very popular there. I think it is there, like their vast majority of people are
Zen
Buddhist.
Buddhism, right?
Yeah, I could be. But Shinto is very much like just everything has a spirit. Nature itself is like, other cultures have stuff like Mother Nature. This is a little more granular and also just more neutral in that, like, like, yes, a rock has a spirit, but like it's just like it just has the one job of just to be a rock. It doesn't have a want or a desire. And so it's kind of, to go back to the human thing of greed, it's like when you push against natural balance, when one force or side of a conflict is maybe overzealous or just like blind, just has blinders on to the ramifications of their own actions, it ends up costing far more people far more than everybody sought out to even ever put on the line. So, like, especially like in Mononoke, again,
More
like
than
the
they
reason,
bargained for. Oh yeah. I
yeah,
was
again,
thinking
like
that one, like cutting the head off of the forest spirit was
oh my god, yeah, it's practically traumatic.
pretty much like world ending,
Yeah.
how they depicted it.
Yeah, it's practically apocalyptic, which again goes to like a couple of the earlier stuff, what I was talking about, almost like fantasy punk with like Nausicaa, that like, it's kind of apocalyptic in some of them. But luckily, a lot of them are far more sweet and just thinking about how like you really do just need to be like respectful, and just like kind of mind your manners and just like accept things for how it is. The same way that they approach all that, like fantastical and magical realism of just like, of course, there's witches. They're just not supposed to fly at a certain height in the city square. Like
Everybody knows
it's just,
that.
yeah, it's just an accepted thing. And so I do think that it's interesting that I would be curious if it's even known or ever expressed, maybe just how like Shinto or how present those things are to like however many of the Ghibli staff, particularly the most creative people, and definitely to Miyazaki himself. But again, Totoro is the best example of it, where again, like the little girl gets lost in the forest, she comes back okay, and when they tell the dad, "Hey, we both saw this huge thing in the forest," the way the dad just kind of accepts it, I was like, "Oh, that must have been the Forest King, and we should thank this big tree for watching over you and letting you go there." Like it was
Mm.
it's just like it's a part of nature. It's just something else to accept. It's not something that you should own or be afraid of or like desire. It's just like, oh yeah, like, of course that's a thing, and we should be happy that we got to see it. It's an appreciative look at just the world and nature in general.
With that being said, let's tie a bow on the spee and bring it on home. Why tell the good people? Why study the works of Studio Ghibli as a whole, not just Miyazaki films, even though those are often the standouts? Why study the works of the full studio's filmography?
The films of Studio Ghibli are so incredibly, I don't want to use the word synonymous too much, but they are quintessential. Let's say that. They're very
Mm.
quintessentially anime. Like I mentioned earlier, the amount of people who have seen, like, for instance, like what I like to just call what are like popularly known as just the little guys, whether you're talking about like the little dust bunnies in Totoro, the little like shaky head guys from Mononoke, there's things that have just permeated the
Love those
globe.
guys.
Right, the little guys, you gotta love them.
I love those guys.
The range and impact of these films is so difficult to understate, that you really could say anime, and I mean, yeah, if you're not talking about TV shows that are also incredibly popular, most like anime movies outside of stuff like Akira and others, you're probably
Or
gonna land
Ghost in
on
the
a Ghibli.
Shell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there are
like
some
there's
big
other
ones that are a little
ones
more
that are
like
great.
cyberpunk, but if you go outside of like the futuristic cyberpunk style, you're probably going to land on a Ghibli.
Yeah.
So they're incredibly important to Japanese culture with how popular they've been for like basically 40 years. And just again how incredibly pervasive, maybe not pervasive, but just the way that they are incredibly ingrained across pop culture speaks to how passionate the people that created these things are. Again, like just how iconic the look of the most of these are. Again, just that how fluid they are. Like the animation style is, the fantasticalness of the stories, and just the beauty of the scores. There's not an aspect of the key Ghibli films that won't leave you a little changed after you watch one.
Amen. And there you have it, guys. Studio Ghibli from top to bottom. The history, the works, the legacy that is Studio Ghibli. I want to thank you guys for listening. I want to thank my guest, Mr. Philip Church, for joining us today. But before we go, we got a little extra for you, a little icing on the cake, cherry on top with what we call the gem of the week. Before we talk gems, though, let's talk sponsors. Today's gems are brought to you by Zencastr. Zencastr is our go-to tool for remote podcast recordings. What's great is that you can record separate audio and video tracks, and it's all backed up on a secured cloud, so you never lose your hard work. Even better, it's easy to use, and there's nothing to download. So go to Zencastr.com and use promo code Art of the Beholder and get 30% off your first 3 months with the Pro account. Now back to the gems. Mine's going to be short and sweet, so when we get out of here, it is a band. I will say this. I like this album so much that if I would have known about it sooner, it would have been on my best of 2023 list of music. It is just the 3 letters. It's a duo, but this duo is named a.s.o. So their debut album is literally just called a.s.o. And it is an amazing marriage of trip hop and dub and electronica and everything we love here at AOTB and NDP. And guys, check it out. a.s.o.
I got 2. I got a podcast. Hello from the Magic Tavern.
Okay.
It's not new, but it is ongoing, and it is the basic premise is an improviser from Chicago has a fictionalized version of himself where he fell through a portal into a magical world called Foon. It's all improvised, which as you'll probably recall from my love of Mission to Zix. But it's been really fun. So that's one. Again, just a nice lighthearted, just something to make you laugh on the drive to work. Hello from the Magic Tavern. And then just really quick, I have gotten back into the band Alt J.
Ooh, Alt J. I remember them. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Thanks Spotify algorithm for tossing that back in there. I forgot. I liked them. I already liked them some.
Okay.
I have like a newfound appreciation for them, kind of like how I have for other bands recently. Where just as I grow and mature, I'm looking at it a little differently. I also love a weird voice. Apparently, that's just what I've been told that I like weird voiced singers. Alt J guy. Love you to death, bud.
Guys, check it out, Alt J. And if you want to get in touch with Mr. Philip Church, Mr. Church, tell him how to do it.
I have a website. It is philipchurch.com. That is where you will find most of my best samples of fiction and nonfiction from audiobooks, as well as some of my demos for like commercial and like radio type of stuff for voiceover, not just audiobooks, as well as a contact me form.
philipchurch.com. Guys, check it out. And if you like that, you can always check out some of our stuff at novadayproductions.com. You can follow us at _novo_day, and day is DE, and at Nova Day Media. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the things. And if you'd like to sponsor our little love child or be on the show, you can reach out to us at novadaymedia@gmail.com. So until next time, you know what to do. We'll see you in the next one. But in the meantime, be good to each other. And as always, good luck and Godspeed. We love you.
Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Novo Day Productions. Created and hosted by Novo Day and the Novo Day Collective. Facebook.com/Novo Day Media. At Novo Day Media on Twitter and Instagram. Music by A Company. Facebook.com/ACO Music 123. ACO on Spotify. Logo design by Tom Justice, JESTUS, of thejusticecompany.com. And executively produced by Clayton Anderson. All rights reserved.
All right, Grandma.